Hi, everyone. Welcome to one of the first brainstorming sessions that we're going to have about a topic. I'll tell you a little bit more about the topic, but first let me explain the concept of a brainstorming session. This is something that has been floating around for a while. We've been trying to have this kind of a session where we discuss not with the intention of trying to, like compete with another point of view or just express your point of view. We go one step beyond that. We try to do this purely for the problem for the purpose of solving a problem. And so this session is all about like us sitting together and trying to solve a certain problem so that like we can have some constructive dialogue that is geared towards an outcome. So we don't have enough of these. Like we have like conversations around like how we blame other people or whom to blame about this, or just ranting and venting, unproductive discussions, right? I mean, not unproductive in the total sense. It is productive in the sense that it's like giving them emotional relief, or it is giving them solace. It is making them feel good or making them connect with other people who feel the same way. But I want to go beyond that. Like I want us to start having conversations that yield to a certain constructive outcome that is aimed with the intention of problem solving. So that is the whole purpose of a brainstorming session. So we do have a problem statement at hand today. Last session we were talking about the discussion regarding. Okay, I think some people are trying to ask some questions in the WhatsApp. I think it's for everybody. Anybody can join, Saju. So last time we had a discussion regarding what like whether to legalize drugs or not, and we had a very productive conversation. We had a lot of like ideas floating around, and that made me think about, okay, maybe this is the right time where we can have a session like this where we are talking about solving a certain problem. And so that's what the session is about. We're trying to solve a certain problem regarding drug regulation. So the topic of this today's session is exploring a legal framework for drug regulation in India. Okay, so this is the topic. We are basically trying to gonna come together to discuss, and then like we'll start like forming some ideas. And the at the end of the session, maybe we have like a rough action plan as to, or instead of an action plan, maybe it can also be like something that is just like a purely like concept. Because like before you have an action plan about something, you have to first come up with a robust concept, and use that as something to leverage and bring change in society. So this is actually a way for us to invite serious people to come in and have like a very productive intellectual discourse that is constructive in the outcome. So I don't want to ramble on too much. I've given you enough context. I'm going to quickly share my screen. I'll tell you like a little bit more about how this is going to work. So I hope you guys can see my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I kind of want to have it bigger. Okay. I'm struggling, guys.
It was full screen.
Yeah, it was full screen, but I'm having some issues here. Anyway, so I usually use FigJam for like sort of brainstorming and like coming up with ideas, or like just having like collaborative conversations. I hope you guys can see my screen, and you can see my cursor moving, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we want to start with the fundamentals first. So when we are trying to solve a problem, first of all, we need to have a clear understanding of what the problem is, and we are going to just like outline the problem first of all, and then look at like how we can solve it. So I'm going to like lay out what the problem statement is. By the way, in case like if it's too small or something, you guys can let me know, and then I can change the font size and things like that. And by the way, before we even get started, I want to know if like everybody's clear on the concept and what we're trying to achieve here. Do you have any questions on this? Thoughts?
I think maybe there are some Probably people who didn't attend the last session. Maybe you can just give a brief
Okay.
gist about what it is.
Okay, sure. So, like I said, I'm paraphrasing, but the topic of last session was basically should we legalize recreational drug use in India? So, consumption of recreational drugs must be legalized in India. Agree or disagree? You know, yeah. So basically, what we're trying to do is gather together some of the points we had. We had a very productive conversation. We were trying to talk about, should we is it actually beneficial to ban drugs and things like this? And there were a lot of nuanced points raised, because like one of the main reasons is like we all kind of agree that drug use is a problem. It is not something that you can basically close your eyes and say that it's not a big issue. It is a problem. It has individual impacts. It has societal impacts. It kind of like minimizes the productivity of individuals. It kind of like alters their mental states and causes mental health issues, addictions. There are a whole lot of negative uh, outcomes with recreational drug use. But if you observe reality, the problem is that even though you have regulation, for example, we have like weed is like illegal in India or anything else, but you can see that people who really want to get it, they will anyway find the way to get there. So maybe this kind of like a legal framework currently that we have is not effective enough. It is not solving the problem, but it's also like introducing new problems, in that, like, for example, you're looking at if you look at the illegal distribution of marijuana in India, we're looking at people compressing weed and like diminishing the quality of the weed, and they ship it. And in order to maintain the efficacy of that weed, they try to like spike it with some kind of a rat poison. And there have been a lot of cases where this has become fatal. People who consume these spiked up weed, they have problems. And you can hear about like a lot of these kind of issues happening, whether it is like alcohol ban, people trying to like make homemade alcohol and things like that, things going wrong. So when you don't have a proper drug regulation framework, you end up having these kind of outcomes, secondary outcomes that are not intended, which are realistically like a big problem. So if you want to avoid something like this, if you realize that, if you anticipate that certain section of society is always going to want to have drugs, so if you manage to like have a different framework where you can accommodate them, and then you can also like prevent some of the negative outcomes, then you have like a better framework. Okay, so that is the sort of like conclusion we came to last time, that we need to have a better legal framework for drug regulation, so that like we're minimizing harmful drug use, we're minimizing abuse and dependence, and we're minimizing some of the harmful outcomes to society in terms of economic outcomes and lost potential of the people who are victims of this drug abuse. So basically, the whole point of the session is to come up with a framework that we can think about as citizens. I think it's important for us to understand the backs, like the mechanisms of how these frameworks are meant to be made, so that like when we engage in these kind of conversations, it kind of like strengthens our own understanding of how society is functioning or how it ought to function. And we'll also have some things that we can look at in terms of data that we're gathering as we do this, because like this is not going to be like a completely off the head. We need to have a look at some of the things. Maybe we can even continue the session if we're not able to make enough progress. But basically, I just want to have a quick session talking about these things. So I hope that gives you certain idea as to what we're trying to do here. Shreya and Sandeep, you guys got it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, can I put few points?
Sure, go ahead.
So see, I want to sort of baseline as to what is the concern we are trying to tackle here. So the drug use is, there are multiple facets to it, which we discussed last time. One was the addiction part. The other one was the loss of brain function after the event or the consumption of drug. Like we discussed last time, like if somebody goes into a
exactly
therapy center, So these points, so we are going to discuss on bringing a legal framework that can prevent these points, right?
Exactly.
Or
So
trying to regulate.
no, actually, this is exactly what the session is about. For us to come to an agreement on what the problem is and what is the ideal outcome. Even that much, right? If you have like sufficient clarity on even that much, that's a huge breakthrough, right? Because like right now, the framework that we do have is not very thoughtfully made. It is not very effective. It is not. There is no clarity on what the objective is, and there is no transparency in how these things are done. So I just want this to be like an exercise for citizens to step up and take initiative in some of these like think tank kind of initiatives. What we are doing right now is basically like we are a mini think tank, very informal, but still we are a group of individuals who are intellectually oriented, who are coming together to solve problems. So we are informal think tank, and our goal is to sort of like exactly identify the problem and then like look at it in a way that is like solution oriented. Okay, so that is the objective, and we'll also discuss like what are the things that we're actually trying to achieve with this. So first thing is like Saju was saying, like there is like individual problems with drugs, problems with drug regulation, let's say. Okay, individual impact, like impact of drugs on individual health, wellness, and economic, I guess like economic sustainability, psychology, wellness. Yeah. And also the impact of drugs on society as a whole. There is an economic cost to this, like, rehabilitation, right? Societal expense on rehabilitation of individuals who are victims of drug abuse. And there is also like an illegal framework of distribution, right? So there is also like a certain network of illegal activities that are being propelled through the existing drug distribution systems. Existing drug distribution systems also are often used for other illegal activities. Again, we have to like validate these things, because like these are all our hypotheses, right? We can also argue about this. Maybe you can say that this is not actually a valid statement to be made. There is evidence against it, so we can also like look at all those things. Maybe if I'm missing something, you can mention that as we sort of like identify all the problems, and we can sort of like compartmentalize these things, and then that will help us get some clarity on solutions.
So yeah, so because of this illegality, the law enforcement also comes into a gray area. You see, although they are supposed to enforce the law, they become the part of the problem, and they become the part of the supply chain itself. So even if it is legalized, the whoever is consuming, they will have a right to not to be afraid of the law enforcement, right? If let's say someone is got caught, because of the failure of the law enforcement only, this distribution is happening, right? I mean, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So holding a victim, or maybe like whoever is consuming. So if you're trying to penalize or like criminalize the distribution network, that is okay. But I am not very inclined towards criminalizing the consumer, because at least the consumer has a way of protecting himself from the misuse of the law enforcement.
So you're saying that you can actually minimize the law enforcement overhead by focusing on the distributors rather than the consumers.
To a certain extent, yes. And also it benefits the consumer in a way that they don't have to be, they don't have to be law-abiding citizens towards when they are facing the law enforcement personnel.
What do you mean they don't have to be law-abiding citizens?
No, if I have a alcohol with me, let's say bottle of alcohol, I'm not supposed to be afraid of somebody catching me and criminalizing me, right? But if somebody possesses something that is illegal, like let's say marijuana, they will be illegal. Although they are not trying to distribute it, they are only kept it for their own consumption. But that will affect them in a different way because they are trying to consume it but not distribute it. So it minimizes the criminal activities that they are not actually committing. So that's
okay. So you're saying that by discounting some of the activities as not being criminal, we are sort of like minimizing the workload for law enforcement.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so what Mr. Sandeep is saying, it would actually lead to people buying drugs even more, because it would establish a mentality that if we get caught, we won't be punished. We just tell them who we got it from and we are free. This is what the mentality it will create. I don't see buying drugs or not buying drugs. I think it is also our own responsibility. It's our choice that we make. So if we should be punished, we should be punished. I think this will literally just cause people to buy even more drugs, because they will think that if we get caught, we just tell them who we got it from and we will be free.
Okay,
that's a very good point.
Raghav, just want to get a quick show of hands. What are we against? Are we against the addictive nature of the drugs, or are we against the drug use itself if suppose it is not addictive?
I think there are multiple dimensions to what is problematic, right? So from an individual standpoint, yes, the addictiveness is like unhealthy, but also excessive regulation from the top down has negative side effects on the personal freedom of individuals in society. Because as a society, if we aspire to maximize the personal freedom of individuals while maintaining the stability of the societal structure, that is the ideal outcome. Because we want to live in a society where individuals are feeling most free, because that is a huge quality of life indicator. If you want to build a society that has a high quality of life, you need to make sure that you're maximizing the personal freedom without impacting the stability of the society. So I would say that is something that this is like coming from me. Like I'm not saying that this is what everybody should think and this is how everybody should believe, but I think most of us would prefer that. Nobody wants to live in a society that is like highly constrained. Nobody wants to live in a Saudi Arabia versus like let's say somewhere else where you have more personal freedom, right? So I would say that.
So let's just say that we are against the naturally occurring drugs, because recreational drugs and natural occurring drugs are very different. The marijuana given to cancer patients is fundamentally different. It acts a different way and it's not addictive.
Yeah, so I would say I would like refer to that as an ineffective classification, and
we did try to classify them as soft drugs and hard drugs in the last session. So it's
ineffective classification and regulation based on the properties of the drug in question. Okay, so these are all some of the problems. We actually discussed some of these things in the past, last time we had this discussion. And okay, so now we have looked at the problems. I think if we have more, we can listen.
Hold on. Raghav, I have one point to be very clear. I have a very, very simple and very short question. Are we against drugs because of its addictive nature, or are we against the drug use itself, even if it is addictive or not?
I think that's again is the question of are we against recreational drugs or naturally occurring drugs?
No. Let's break down the question. First of all, his question is like, are we like sort of like looking down upon the addictive nature of drugs or the drug use itself? It's a question that needs to be answered properly. First of all, addictiveness is not the sole negative outcome of drug abuse. That is one of the negative outcomes. Okay, so there are outcomes like such as a loss of cognitive performance, loss of competence in life, because the people who are addicts to drugs, they have secondary problems that go with it, because like if you're an addict, you're probably also financially unstable, because like you're spending a lot on your addiction. So there are like secondary outcomes as well. Addiction is just like the sort of like the doorway for all of these other problems to come up, but that is not the sole problem. Okay. And some of these secondary outcomes have tertiary outcomes, like on society. So for example, if somebody is an addict, and they're pulling their families into like economic ruin because of their addiction, they're also going to have tertiary impact on society, where they start stealing and robbing, and they will start creating societal disturbances. Okay, these are all like the various impacts, and so you cannot simply look at it as addiction or something else. You have to look at it holistically, in terms of degrees of like layers on which the negative effect happens. So first of all, when they become victims of drug abuse, they start ruining their life, and then they'll start ruining the lives of the people immediately around them, like a family or neighborhood or something, and then they will start becoming a nuisance to society. So this is the degradation path of somebody who is a drug abuser.
So let me, I think in the last meeting also somebody put forth the point that Steve Jobs used to do drugs. Mm-hmm. That's a very wrong example per se, but Raghav, in what you spoke in the past 2 minutes and what others have spoken in the previous session that we held in last Saturday, I believe, I could not see any other problem other than the addiction part of it. If suppose the drugs were not addictive, I mean, purely hypothetical thing, if there was a temporary high that you get when you take a drug, and then after you stop taking it, maybe a day or so later, you are back to normal, then I don't think people have any issues with that, because that's the same thing that happens when you take alcohol. A person who takes alcohol, and there are people who get addicted to alcohol also, but the person who takes alcohol can come to office on Monday. He can go on a binge on the weekend, and then he will come back to office on Monday perfectly normal. Right? So I think the core issue here is addiction, and that's why the society looks down upon drugs. Is that correct? Or are we really tackling the addiction part of it?
See, I don't understand why it matters so much, whether you're focusing so much on addiction. Addiction is just one of the outcomes, one of the negative outcomes, right?
No, the other two negative outcomes that you mentioned.
Despite the drug you described, there is still a problem, and the problem is that you are relying on the drug to provide you satisfaction in the first place.
See, I'll tell you actually one prop. The thing that I want to tell you is that it's not like just because alcohol is legal in most places, it is not having negative effects. Yes, like alcohol and marijuana are some kind of like similar in some of the effects that they have on the person. Maybe you can even argue that one is healthier than the other, but the problem is that there is an ineffective law enforcement that is happening, and that is the reason why alcohol is legal, and then something else which does the kind of something similar is not illegal, is not legal. And the other thing is that addiction is just like one of the outcomes. Like I said, there are other outcomes. For example, if you take somebody and then like get them really heavily drunk, and then they start driving the car, even if they're not an addict, they are causing secondary and tertiary problems in society because of what the drug did, right? So
that is true. So
problem.
We have laws that address that specific problem. For example, drinking and driving is not allowed, but drinking and sitting in the passenger of a car is allowed.
That's what I'm saying. Don't look at it purely as like drug consumption. There are like other effects related to drug regulation. The whole topic of this conversation is a legal framework for drug regulation. So drug regulation means consumption is also a factor involved in regulation, not just the distribution, or like, it's also about like how you conduct yourself as a consequence of the drug effect. There are like various, like DUI laws, right? In the US, if you say driving under influence, If you are somebody who's driving rashly, but you're not under the influence of drugs, there is a different penalty, and then there is if you are, then there is a different penalty. So that is what drug regulation means. Drug regulation means you're mitigating all the negative side effects of the existence of drugs. So it's not just about addiction; it's also about like some of the things that happen as a short-term outcome of drug consumption. Not just addiction is more of a long-term, like a phenomenon. But even short-term phenomenons and things like tertiary effects like on the finance and infrastructure of society, there's also like a very important impact, right?
Raghav, I'll tell you, not very long back in India, people who would consume our alcohol were looked down upon in society, and that has changed over a period of years. And so now I'm wondering what those days when people were against the members of the society who were drinking, why they were being looked down upon, right? So are we on the same path with drugs also?
I don't understand how this relates to what we are discussing right now. So we're trying to talk about drug regulation in terms of...
Yeah.
The thing is trying to say that someday everything will get normalized, and all these potent drugs would get normalized. The effect on the society will be multiple folds. If the effect of alcohol is already in such a big, whatever the scale it would be right now, if you legalize the rest of the potent drugs, which are the drugs that we are trying to say, like let's say soft drugs, will it have more? No, it will add to the fire, like adding petrol to the fire.
I know.
That is what
So I want to make sure that you guys understand that the objective of a legal framework is not to minimize drug use. It is to minimize the negative impact of existence of drugs.
Correct.
Okay, so we need to look at the actual outcomes of the problems that are caused by drugs, and then we're trying to see, okay, because like if you outright ban drugs, right, it's like a brute force solution, and you're also damaging the personal freedom of the individuals when you do this. So I think that if you want to solve this problem in a very granular way and a very intelligent way, you have to look at the mechanism of the negative impacts that are happening as a consequence of drugs. So that means you have to first start classifying the outcomes of like what are the things that are happening, and how do you look at this problem, so that like you can come up with a solution that minimizes these things. So I've listed out some few things that have come up in the discussion where we're talking about various outcomes of things, and you can measure the impact of the problem using these things. So permanence of the drug effect and severity of the drug effect, chronicity of the side effects. We also have like societal expense on drug abuse and crime rates. These are all things that we can look at to see how we can measure the impact of a certain drug. I think first, I'm just like getting some ideas off the top of my head, and I'm gonna note it down. So for solution, right, I think we need to first look at how to classify drugs on the basis of, I'm going to put these things in there: permanence of drug effects, chronicity of side effects, or like things like rate of severity of drug effect, rate of dependence, like how quickly are they getting dependent on the drugs. So I think overall you can also like classify them on the basis of like cost to society kind of a thing. If you classify, for example, let's say that somebody is addicted to coffee. Now there is not such a huge cost to society on that. Yeah, actually, the society thrives on it by enabling economic mechanisms to feed that addiction. So if you live in a city full of like coffee addicts, you probably have a good economic prospect as a coffee shop. So in a certain sense, you're actually benefiting out of their addiction, right? So there has to be like a proper way of like classifying the drugs based on the impact it is having, the net impact it is having on society as a whole. Because the purpose of having proper drug regulation is that the society benefits out of it. So society is the recipient or the beneficiary of this thing. And that means that there may be some situations where we'll have to look down at the needs of a few to ensure the needs of the larger section of society. So we will have like a sort of like a variable approach to it, but basically we're just trying to examine what is the impact of somebody's addiction to this substance. Okay, so we'll for example, if you like create a framework where you're listing out various attributes of like coffee, like weed, and methamphetamines, oxycodone, or whatever, and ketamine, and all these other like hard drugs. As you measure those things about that substance, right, about the impact of that substance, you should have like a very sensible classification of drugs, so that like you can actually have like a proper laws in effect for the different classifications. So it actually makes sense that you're leaving cigarettes to be like legal, but then you ban marijuana, because like marijuana is just as harmful as cigarettes, and you can argue about like the addiction rate of it, but it is probably just as unsafe as alcohol. So it's kind of strange that it is banned while these two are like legalized. So it doesn't make sense. So based on a classification, we can come up with like a very sensible approach to how we classify drugs and how we put them into different categories, because that is the most important process, the most important step for the next step in the process, which is how do you tackle each of these things. And maybe we can then look at like how these things are distributed, how these things are produced. So like Himanshu was saying, like we need to look at like whether they're natural or not, right? So we can look at those things. So I'm going to quickly like make notes of the things that I just mentioned. So we're going to first focus on effective classification of the drugs on the basis of various impacts it has on the individual consumer, their immediate friends and family, or people near.
You can separate the second point, impact on friends and family
at large. Yeah. Now, I'm just noting down what are the various things that we need to look at to classify these things. So I'm just like noting down these things. So once we get done with the effective classification.
Yeah. Just one line, Raghav. It's a good point you mentioned. Cigarettes can cause cancer, but I'm not sure if marijuana can cause cancer.
See, I think in terms of like lung damage and things like this, right? Marijuana has like the same amount of like tar and all these like other substances that cigarettes have. And I think...
Is it? Okay, that's news to me. Let me research.
No, I think it is like that in terms of like long-term research. Right? The problem is that marijuana long-term research is like kind of like skewed because it is not a legal substance, right? So there is, the data is kind of like all over the place. You'll find like data about this, studies supporting this thing, and then studies are also supporting the opposite thing. So it's kind of like a problematic thing.
Well, you were saying that, I could add another point that it gives more freedom to the medical research when they are legalized. And also education and training for the medical personnel to deal with the patients who do get addicted.
Exactly, yeah. So again, that comes next, like we're looking at, based on the classifications, we can then have granular laws applied to the different classes in terms of how beneficial the effective enforcement of those laws will be to the society. Okay, so I want to like come up with like a more objective thing where we can measure things and we can do things. We can do things like more scientifically rather than on the basis of like something like ethics or morality and things like, because those things are kind of subjective. I think that we have to, if you're building a society on the basis of like metrics like GDP and things like this, that you need to also look at the impact of a certain something in terms of like measurable things. Of course, there are going to be things that are not measurable, like for example, your subjective well-being and all these things. So we have to look at like how to look at those as well. But let me finish this thought. I was trying to say that effective classification of the drugs on the basis of various impacts it has on the individual consumer, their immediate family, and family or people near, and the society at large on the basis of this. Yeah, I think that's basically what I've said here. On the basis of
Raghav, when it comes to this problem, I think there is already studies regarding the more potent drugs, like chewable drugs that people are using for a very long time. And the medical research does exist, and how it affects the society in total. I think we can get those data, because they are legalized, and they, as you know, it's a part of the advertisements. They put it out there like very, very in your face. Like you go everywhere, they put in your face they don't do drugs. Like it's part of our lives nowadays, right? It's a part of you're watching a movie and someone is drinking. They put a sign there. So it's a continuous contrast between the pop culture, and then the government is trying to push you towards not to use it. So there is a conscious choice that an adult can make, right?
Yeah.
You know what actually happens when you go to movies and you see basically a preface where they show some patient in miserable state because he has cancer, because he smoked cigarettes. What happens with these things is that if you just force it too much on people's faces, what happens is that they take it for granted slowly, because just how abundant it is everywhere, the people just start to take it for granted, because I've seen it 100 times, I know, just remove it out of my face. So when you look at, when you go to movie theater and you look at that ad, I am pretty sure none of you think that maybe I should not consume drugs because it causes all this. You just think that it's a disgusting ad.
Yeah, and also it's like Himanshu said, like it's kind of like desensitized. When it's all over your face, it's desensitizing. And also the other thing is that it even comes up like, it kind of like brings people's consciousness to that. Maybe like people who are addicts to smoking, right? They will look at that and then they'll want to smoke. It's almost like an ad for an addict. I don't know. There are like
that is correct. But what I'm trying to say is, you of course you do know that you do feel the effects of it. I'm not sure. I don't really agree with the last speaker, because when I do see these ads, yes, I do feel like I should not consume them. Like
yes. Yeah. So I think I'm not really sure like what is the effectiveness of these ad campaigns. I'm not sure if there's any like studies done to like prove the efficacy of these things. Again, that's something that we have to like I guess research, right?
And
things that we want to research on.
Honestly speaking, if I ever haven't seen that ad, I would never know that could cause cancer actually in that context.
Okay.
So I mean, smoking and drinking is like,
that's just the knowing the fact that it can cause cancer. I don't think you really needed the ad to
what
know
I'm trying
that
to
it can
say
cause
is,
cancer.
Without that ad, I wouldn't probably know these kind of drugs exist. That's what I'm trying to say, because I'm not much into this kind of a drug.
See,
I wouldn't probably personally know.
You just pointed another problem is that these ads sometimes cause people to know that there are these drugs present.
When you say something not to do it, people who doesn't know will know that there is something exists. I understand that contradiction of the ad itself, because it's also showing the other side of the coin that people don't know until that point.
I mean, what if like we had an ad that said like don't consume marijuana because you'll get addicted and you'll start doing this. I mean, people who don't even know about that as an option will start getting curious.
I think the best ad would be to actually make people realize internally that this is what losers do, and this is not something a dignified person would do. Most ads, you would see, they do not really focus. They would not really focus on how people perceive the ad, or if people really even understand the actual consequences of this, because people really take every single smoking ad for granted.
in my experience, 8 out of 10 people doesn't want to smoke, but they do.
Including the
They know,
addicts.
yeah, they know that they are addicted. They know that they are they treat themselves inferior because they are smoking. There are only like 20 to 30% of the people who doesn't really care, or they think taking them is superior. But most of the people that I have encountered, they don't want to smoke, but they are addicted to it. So the 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 uh, the argument towards making people inferior, I think it already exists. If I may be wrong, but this is my experience.
But anyway, like actually, I want this session to be more about like discussing the solution. Let's talk about like various aspects. How do you actually come up with something like this that will actually maximize personal freedom and also minimize the harmful effects? Like for example, let's take a like single one drug one by one. We'll look at like the example. So we've been talking about like cigarettes, right? So now let's talk about just what are the effects. Like I think if we do a case by case analysis, we'll get more clarity about this. So nicotine, right? Nicotine is the substance that is in cigarettes and tobacco. So this is the substance that is causing the addiction, but we'll classify as tobacco, okay? Because nicotine is not the only substance in that. So
yeah, the first problem I think about is passive smoking, I think.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's the first problem. I mean, like not the first problem. So let's do this in terms of like who is consuming. We'll start from that person, because the consumer of the drug is the first victim, right? Let's start from there. So it causes like bad teeth, bad breath, lung illness. Yes, Rhea, go ahead.
Yeah, I had an view on this, like based on the ad that you mentioned, right? Like we have the ads based on tobacco or cigarette. So what if we have a view such that, like, if suppose you are smoking, so you can do this instead. So like we can just target those individual people, like how these like okay, tobacco will give you this much diseases. Instead, we can say if you are already having the addiction, so why not you do this instead? Like how there was ads based on anti-cigarette kind of ads, they were there. I think it was Neo some cigarettes or something. So they targeted like that. So if we promote,
let's go step by step. Like we'll first like identifying the problem and looking at all the different effects it is having. So let's look at this. We'll get to that. I think that's one of the potential solutions you're talking about, right?
But did you also? I don't think I understood what you were trying to say, but.
No, she was saying that there are products that are like alternatives to tobacco, and
that is exactly what I was talking about. See, I don't think that we should focus on providing alternatives. I think we should focus on making people unreliant on drugs. We stop their dependence on drugs in the first place. I don't think replacing something would be a good idea.
See, there is no
but
like
actually, sometimes it's like you can't get away with a habit instantly. So you have to take it in steps. So you have to
so that's what you are saying. I get it now. I get it.
Yeah, I think the you can't say like one solution, because like there are like different spectrum of like people who are affected by this, right? So there are some people who are way too deeply addicted that they cannot like instantly snap into like independence. They have to take various steps. They have to like have like a intermediary crutch for them to use. So those kind of things. So I like I said earlier, I was saying like we need to classify the scope of the effect, right? The scope of the impact. Friends, family, I guess like surrounding people, okay, immediately surrounding people, and the third is the society at large. So these are the three layers in which I see that okay, we can measure the impact of something. So for example, right now we're looking at tobacco. So for individuals, it starts with like if you look at like exactly what happens when somebody smokes, right? It first passes through their lips, like we can even like measure it or like do it like this, very detailed, like the lips start, and then like the teeth, and then their oral health.
Everything it touches, it kills, as simple as it.
Yeah, so I would say like classify this as like oral health, and then like, you know, lungs, and I guess like throat is actually a very, very important organ that is affects, right? And then it also affects, besides these like very physiological impacts, it also has impacts on, I guess,
also goes to the liver,
psychology
because
broadly.
liver has to,
actually, there are also child laborers and women, some rural area women involved in making of these cigarettes,
Yeah. So now,
children.
then it becomes like society at large, where we are encouraging child labor. Yeah, something like this.
Not only child labor, if dealing with nicotine almost every day, I think it will cause cancer to even people working around it.
Okay.
As well as passive smoking, right? When someone else smokes near you and you inhale some of that smoke, then there is also a chance that you can get cancer.
That needs to be researched, because if you're talking about drugs, then at least I saw just now NIBH says there's no lung cancer, evidence of lung cancer. And passive smoking in marijuana is not there. But that is a point of research.
I think even health hazard to employees is also a point of research. I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that.
So we'll put like a star mark on like wherever we need like more evidence. So secondary health effects of passive smoking, even if there is no conclusive evidence of lung cancer happening to people of passive this thing, right? We need to start looking at maybe like there are milder health effects, right? Maybe it gives you, maybe the rate of cancer is not so strong, but maybe it exists in some sense. So we'll look at that. I'm just like marking it as like something that we need to research further. So psychological effects of, let's like finalize the list of things for the individual. This is not the entire list. I'm pretty sure like there are other things like irritability, like financial burden, right? Because like cigarettes are expensive. For somebody who's smoking,
how cancer works is not really like if you smoke for 10 years, then you will definitely get cancer. Cancer is really a matter of chance that it can happen at any time. So I don't think, we should consider it like maybe if he smokes once or twice, there's not really any problem, because cancer is a matter of chance. It can happen at any time. There's no specific time.
Yeah, it depends on a certain psychological, like, or a specific condition, precondition, right? Something that exists in the individual, like maybe genetic susceptibility to it. There are things like that.
Let's say if someone had to get cancer, smoking would worsen it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it can exacerbate, or it can just like, it definitely has an impact on the quality of your health, even if it doesn't yield in cancer, right? So we can say something like preconditions as one of the things that we're looking at. So this is like genetic susceptibility, in terms of like, especially in terms of like individual thing, right? So I'll move this down here, I think. So in terms of financial, psychological effects, right? Irritability, addiction, dependence.
No, hold on. So you're talking about permanent or the temporary effects?
Again, that's a very good point. We need to look at, see, some of I'll say like these are like, I guess like exceptions we need to look at, right? Preconditions, genetic susceptibility, and you talked about severity, right? Or what did you say, Saju?
Yeah, you can say severity. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I was thinking that whether the effects have to be classified according to permanence or, does it last beyond the event?
Yeah. So no, those are all like things we'll look at. Now, right now, we're just like listing out the problems that it has as per scope. When I'm saying scope, I'm just talking about whether it's affecting just the individual or the surrounding people or the society at large, right? Surrounding. You can just say surrounding people because like friends and family is just like surrounding people anyway. And okay,
can I add one more point? Yeah. So sometimes what happens is some agencies or some group of people who are like testing certain drugs. So there might be some test people who will be, not particularly into drugs, but there is a high chance that they can get into drugs. I don't know, like just wanted to take a view on this angle as well, because there are a lot of time on their preferences, they either stick to no drugs and just they keep it for a test, but there are high chances that they might be influenced with people, and because they are funded, so they feel it like it's not illegal enough to test the drugs and like stuffs like that. So I just wanted an angle on that perspective as well.
See, you've touched on multiple things at once. One of the things is like you're talking about drugs that are being manufactured, right? Not all things that have like a effect on people are manufactured and processed like that. If you have like there are things that grow on the ground, mushrooms, weed, all of these things are like naturally occurring substances. So that is just like one of the factors that is affecting the drug regulation of certain substances. So actually, that's a good point. We'll also look at that. I'll classify it as an industry surrounding that substance.
Sure.
Yeah. Or we can just, instead of calling preconditions, right, we can say exceptions or points of interest, So industry is one thing. I don't know what else you said. Like I think they may not be addicted to the process.
So they might
in terms of
in
terms of research, right? If somebody creates a drug and there is profit for them in distributing that drug, I don't know if you guys have heard of the story of OxyContin. This is a drug that was like a painkiller, kind of like a drug prescribed in the US. It was meant to be something that is meant to suppress your pain, or like should be used to like treat traumatic injuries to the body and things like that. And also like some people have like certain psychological conditions, so they started prescribing this thing, and it was a clinically approved drug that ended up being so addictive that even doctors started abusing it and they become dependents, and the economic cost of this is like immense. It was crazy. There is like a huge TV series also, like this was like a fully legalized drug that was having as bad an effect as like cocaine or something, and people were like getting addicted on a massive scale. So then
Raghav, again this point of addiction has come up. I feel we really are worried about addiction and nothing else. I think that's the fact,
I've told
right?
you several times. I've told you several times that addiction is just one of the outcomes that are affecting people's health. There are health impacts. It is not just the addiction. Addiction is just one of the things. Like for example, if you're getting lung illness or throat illness, this is not just the effect of the addiction alone, but the health, like the physical outcome, but also psychological outcome. Addiction is just one of the factors, Saju. Like there is also economic things, and also like
let me present to you alternate facts.
No, impact of safety on others also. Like for example, if
so let me present you alternate facts. So alcohol is the safe limit of consumption of alcohol is latest research is showing that it is 0 ml. That is 0. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's because again, it's a matter of chance. It's not because that if you drink a certain amount of alcohol, then you will get this much cancer. It's a matter of chance. So what they mean by 0 ounce, what they mean is that if there is no need to consume alcohol, just don't do it. It's like on
hold on. So I can post the research figures here. This is different from cancer, okay?
See, I don't think that you understand it the way it's supposed to be. There is no limit to how much alcohol you can consume safely and how much you can consume without being safe. It's just a matter of chance.
Just to clarify, you're talking about driving while drinking, or just like drinking
Drinking in general.
Drinking in general.
No, I was talking about cirrhosis of liver. So that is not cancer. So I don't know what he's.
I'm sorry, what is not cancer?
So when you drink alcohol, are you saying it causes cancer, or what is your point? I'm sorry, I did not.
No, I'm saying I'm saying that it presents a chance of having a cancer, and that why should you even have that? There is no definite.
My point is, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
See, there is no specific scale that if you drink this much alcohol, then you will get cancer. There is a chance. It doesn't matter if you drink 1 drop of cancer, you can get 1 drop of alcohol, you can get cancer. If you drink like 5,000 liters of alcohol, then also you can get cancer. It's a matter of chance.
Cancer is a different. It's a different beast. You cannot link anything to cancer as such. If I have to put it that way, there is no direct link to cancer to anything. Somebody has a cancer for certain reasons. Let's say we don't know that for the sake of discussion, and whatever you're doing it, some things are making it worse. That's what it is.
Okay, I wanna bring the discussion back to solution oriented discussion. I don't want to have this like kind of like back and forth debates about like something that is not going to result in any outcome. Because this is what we do all the time anyway. I want to focus on this again. Like, you know, let's classify the effects of the problem in terms of the various things. I don't want to hear theories about addiction and all these things. I want to look at, like, first of all, let's look at the full extent of the problems. You know, and addiction is not the only problem. That is my
I'm sorry to say, we are not elicited the problem that we are trying to attack properly.
So what is your theory? Your theory is that addiction is the only problem that we need to look at.
No, my theory is that addiction is the root cause, or addiction is the problem that the society is trying to solve as far as drugs is concerned.
How is that contributing to us? Like, you know, first of all, identifying the problem. First of all, you're talking about a solutioning aspect. So you're talking about, like, okay, in case, like, we have all these problems now, how do we tackle it? So if you look at addiction as the sole, like, or the root cause, and if you focus on that, then we'll be able to get the solution. But we are not there yet. We haven't reached that step yet. We haven't listed out all the things that are problematic. First of all, let's do that, and then we'll get there, and then we'll have different theories talking about how we'll do that.
Let me clarify, or let me put forward my thoughts, and I've spoken very little in this call, hardly 2 minutes actually in total. Let me put forward the fundamental point that you're trying to make. There is a substance that you're having, and that substance causes addiction, and that substance has got many problems associated with it. But people consume that substance because it gives them some positive feelings in their mind. They are able to take care of their personal issues, anxiety and all that. So there is a reason why people consume it. But the society in general is worried about drug use because it's addictive.
People consume it because it's the easiest way to get rid of all of these problems, and it's a problem because it creates a reliance to that problem. People get reliant. People think that they do not need anything but drugs. I've seen people, and I have had the first-hand experiences of people literally saying that all they need in life, every single aspiration they have, everything that they ever want to achieve in life, all they want in their life is money to buy drugs. This is why people resort to stealing to consume drugs. It's because when you have the experience of drug consumption, and you have the experience of that drug changing how your neurological things work, you start to...
No, again, I have to leave now. I have some other meeting. So again, you are talking about addiction. Raghav, I'll come back to this.
Okay, thank you, Saju, for the contributions. Okay, let's you know, because like
Hello, Raghav.
I don't want to look at this as purely as a problem of, like, you know, how do we look at this solution? How do we look at the problem to solve the problem? First of all, we haven't even listed out all of the various outcomes, because, like, we are, you know, if we don't do this, right, we will miss out on the larger picture of, like, what is the impact of this drug. Because for me, right, when we are looking at this problem, first of all, I want to understand what is the effect of this one thing on all the people that are involved, that these drug regulation laws are being, you know, brought in for. So that involves the individuals and the surrounding people and the society at large. And okay, so Sandeep, you said you wanted to say something, and I see Pranesh is raising his hand. Like, go ahead, guys. Share your mind.
Hey Raghav, hello.
Yeah.
It's a long time. I think I raised this this meeting debate. I'm not sure. I tried to listen to the last like the Saturday call, but I had to like stop in the middle. But the thing is, I could always argue that these individual health problems, I know that these are my problems, but I'm still actively choosing to do it. How would you feel about it?
Again, so if the cost of the impact of you using that drug, because to sort of like exercise your personal freedom, is not having secondary impacts on these things, then we can have a different way of looking at it, right? See, that is the reason why I'm doing this, because I want to come to a point where we look at this and we say, okay, you know what, it actually makes sense for us to classify a certain drug on the basis of these two things, because this is what is actually of importance to society at large.
Okay.
Not this part alone. So if you have a drug,
rephrase it. Sorry.
If you let me finish. If you have a drug, for example, let's take caffeine as an example, right? Because I wanted to get to this, like, we want to have like a comparison of things that we have like a different health, like, psychological association, perception. Caffeine has a different perception. Tobacco has a different perception. Today, we can consume caffeine together as a family. We cannot do this right now. So there is a clear difference in terms of cultural perception of this drug and all the various things. So if we start listing out the same things for tobacco and caffeine, we can have a look at, okay, how do we classify these things so that like we can actually put these things together in one group, and then these things together in one group, so that like we can look at, okay, we understand the deeper problem now. The problem is that these drugs have these things which we want to prevent. So we want to prioritize that. So actually looking at it in detail helps us to prioritize how we respond to the effects of those drugs.
Okay, got that. So let me rephrase it a bit. Okay. So let's say whatever I consume is getting taxed, and that tax is going to the government, and the government is, let's say, helping the people. So would that classify as a good thing for a society or a bad thing for a society?
Exactly. So what we are doing is, so now when we're looking at this for caffeine, right? Like, so we can say that instead of health hazards, your, here also, like, we can have this as a positive impact, saying that employment to the people who make cigarettes, right? There is an industry around it, industry and economics.
Yeah. I know about it because I work in it, so fine.
Okay. So we will have something similar for coffee as well. So these are all things that are common to industries, right? But coffee does not have like health hazards. Like people who work in coffee factories are not more susceptible, or maybe they are. We don't know yet. So we are basically going off on known things, and the things that we're not really sure of, we're putting a star on it so that we can look into it. But basically, the purpose of this exercise is basically to arrive at a certain understanding of how to classify them. Because one of the problems we discussed is how do we classify this? Ineffective classification was discussed, right? So we're just trying to solve that one first, and then based on this, we'll have some other solutions for some of these things. That is the idea.
How about public sanitation and environmental factors? Like, for example, cigarette butts can sometimes concentrate in a place where they contaminate the groundwater supply. Not only that, there are hazards of fire, soil contamination, water pollution, maybe public health risk as well. People spitting tobacco in almost everywhere.
Yeah.
Even that can be a breeding grounds for parasites and bacteria. In fact, that is one of the main reasons how malaria spreads so much. Me personally, having malaria 5 times. And microplastic pollution, I think it's also a factor, because these all eventually contaminate the groundwater supply which we are consuming. Not we, everyone is consuming.
Yeah, and also, like, I don't know if this is like a significant volume or not, but I do think that there is carbon monoxide in cigarettes, right? So if you're consuming that, and if you're basically burning tobacco on a large scale, it is going to cause air pollution, right? So it is pretty much what is happening when large number of people distribute that large volume of tobacco and then like smoke it at them, and like and at their own time of choosing, and that kind of like pollutes it over the time. That could also be like one of the things.
If I have to put it in a volumes, it is pretty insignificant, Raghav. You cannot even put it in percentages. I'm just trying to.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just like put this here. We'll just like mass air pollution.
I don't know what study Mr. Sandeep read, but carbon monoxide is, I believe, an isotope of carbon dioxide.
No. What I'm trying to say is,
it's not really necessary. It's not really necessary to calculate the percentage of carbon monoxide in cigarettes, because at any point, any compound in the cigarette can be turned into carbon monoxide, which I don't believe anyone calculated. So I don't think that study is a valid study to consider.
The amount of greenhouse gases emitted annually, if you want to put tobacco into that picture, the percentage of this tobacco would be so insignificant. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that.
Yeah. But it is just because it's negligible does not mean it is trivial. You know, like it does not need to be.
I didn't even say negligible. What I'm trying to say, it could be very, very less.
I know. Yeah, that's fine. But we are still measuring we're trying to be comprehensive when it comes to like measuring the impact of these things. So just because we've listed these things does not mean that we are going to attribute, identical values of economic importance to all of these points. We're just going to
elaborate a little bit on what are the exceptions?
What do you mean? What do you mean by acceptance?
No, you have written exceptions and point of interest. What is this section about?
Yeah, so see, we have like various things that are kind of like question marks. For example, somebody was saying that lung illness, the severity of the lung illness can be like dependent on some things. So I noted those things. Severity of the drug effect. These are all things that are variable across individuals, right? So I just like listed it down here. So for caffeine, it's completely different. I think we need to start listing out separately. Like this is like, there is also financial burden for coffee as well, because if you are consuming so much of coffee, you need to pay for those things. But that is also like a plus point. If there's a financial burden, there is always like industry and economics benefiting from it. Because if money is coming out of your pockets, it has to go here, right? So I would say that these two things will cancel out the whole thing, and we can just like look at that. So that's the whole merit of like putting all of these things together. So let's look at the.
There is also the aspect of soil degradation where the tobacco is grown. Tobacco is one of the most nutrient leaching crop there is. It really leaches everything that is that it's planted on. Basically, it leads to soil degradation. I think.
You know what? Yeah, go ahead.
And see, there is also this about caffeine, right? Where coffee beans are grown. Caffeine is one of those crops which actually replenish the soil and its nutrients. There are certain crops which actually replenish the soil quality and the soil minerals, and coffee is one of those. So, but tobacco and nicotine, these really just leach everything from the soil and reduces quality. And also about carbon monoxide, as I specified, that is not the only greenhouse gas that it emits. It also emits, I think it's nitrous oxide or something like that, which is a carcinogen in itself. And it's not releasing one carcinogen. It is actually releasing two carcinogens at the same time, and it releases nitrous oxide in the soil itself. So it could contaminate the crops that could be planted that could have been planted in the future on the same soil.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I've added like soil degradation as one of the things for the society at large, and for coffee as well. Yeah, so we can also look at that. We can say like expense on the natural resources required for large scale cultivation. So if you look at these things, right, actually this was a quick way to gather the impacts, I would say. So actually not just the individual impacts. Obviously there is something positive about it that is making people do it. So short-term stress relief. You can argue about whether it is ultimately beneficial or not, but people do use it. They say they use it for short-term stress relief and social bonding. I mean, this is not really a huge thing, but anyway. Health risks. Yeah, this is one thing. And then addiction and reduced life expectancy, decreased quality of life, and impacts the people surrounding the individual, social connections. Smoking can create social bonds among smokers. Secondhand smoke, health risk for children, pregnancy complications. Yeah, this is such a huge thing,
There is also another aspect where it affects the society at large, because it could raise insurance prices for people who are affected by cancer or cardiovascular diseases because of cancer. So, if people are consuming drugs, they are essentially getting sick, and then they are raising prices of everybody's health insurance because these people are getting sick because of these problems. And I'm just looking at the statistics of this, and the 30% of all cancer cases are due to tobacco and cigarettes, and 10% of all cardiovascular diseases are because of tobacco. So I think these are pretty huge numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think this gives us an idea, right? Like this, we are talking about healthcare costs, loss of productivity, environmental damage, cultivation, cigarette production contribute to deforestation, pollution, and waste. Public health burden, the widespread health impact of smoking places significant burden on public health systems. Yeah, this is also a huge thing. Yeah, I think so. I think we've sort of like comprehensively listed these things out. I think this is actually a better list than this, So let's just do the same thing for caffeine. Maybe we'll just like add these things.
Maybe not a big thing in India, but there are fire hazards associated in Western.
Yeah, that's a good
point.
There
are multiple instances that because of smoking, they have burned down their homes because of negligence.
Burn down home, but homes, forests.
Yeah, forests. Yeah, even there are some very cases that because of smoking, forest fires have started. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but again, I don't know if we can put a causal factor around it. It's like it's not just because of it. It's a mix of just the drug negligence by the person who was smoking.
Yes, of course. Yeah, it's a puzzle that smoking fits into one of them.
Yeah. And so here I'm going to do the same for caffeine, or we can just say, yeah, caffeine. Increased alertness, cognitive performance, mood enhancement, sleep disruption, dependence and withdrawal, potential health risks. Secondary effects, while not as severe as secondary smoke, caffeine can still affect others, especially if it leads to irritability and anxiety in social settings, impact on family dynamics. Social impacts, economic contributions, cultural significance, negative impacts, healthcare costs, environmental impact. Yeah, this is perfect. This is exactly all the things we discussed, right? So, I don't know, I think the next step is basically to look at how do you basically use this to come up with different things that we can standardize as something that we can measure about a certain drug. Came up with this a while ago. But I did want to have a pure discussion without involving that, so that we can kind of build on top of it. I'm gonna quickly share.
Why are we talking about caffeine?
Caffeine is one of the drugs. Caffeine is a drug, right?
I think caffeine is a neurostimulant.
It's a drug, nonetheless. It's technically a drug. It's classified as a drug. And see, that's the other thing that we're talking about. We're not looking at it purely as what is considered to be
the case to be
culturally perceived as negative, because when we hear the word drug, we think of it as a negative thing in society. But medically and technically, all of these things are drugs. It's just that there is a variation in terms of how harmful some of them are and how beneficial some of them are. So even, for example, if you look at pharmacies, right, they're basically drug stores. In many countries, they're called as drug stores because they're selling drugs. A drug is just a different word for something that impacts your physiological chemistry and things like that.
Yeah.
So technically, it's just it's just a term that is used for these things.
Yeah, irrespective of its negative or positive effects on you, they call it a drug.
Exactly. Yeah. So I came up with something. I'm gonna copy paste something here. Okay, so this is something that I kind of like came up with as a actually this is something that I came up with right on that Saturday call. As soon as we had the discussion, I was starting to think about it in terms of like, okay, what do we how do we measure the impact of a drug? So I kind of like came up with this system where if you look at this, there are like very like various dimensions that I'm looking at, various organs or like various dimensions of an individual's well-being. I'm looking at physical well-being, emotional well-being, psychological well-being, spiritual well-being, and then for each of those, we are looking at various levels of impacts on various levels of severity or like I guess like intensity on various factors associated with the effect of the drug on those systems. So on a physical system, have like things like period of exposure. How long do you need to be exposed to something in order to have a certain physical impact? So I'm imagining something like this. Like you draw this, and then you connect it to here, and then like that's like a pathway where like you let's say that for cigarettes you look at like the physical impact, and for that you look at like how long does the period of exposure need to be to, and how high the frequency needs to be, and what valence of the effects. Valence means like it's like positive or negative. Is it like causing harms to is causes harm to the system, in the system, like that. So we can actually all the things that we made, we can just have as we can classify in terms of severity and all those other things. So let me just go through these things. These are all the properties that I came up with. Period of exposure and the frequency of exposure kind of determines like what kind of an impact you will have on it. And balance of effects, like if it's harmful, that is, then you have to look at it separately. And severity of effects, like you can classify it as mild to none, moderate, severe, extreme, or fatal. And have like permanence of effects in terms of like effects are short term, effects are linger for weeks, days to weeks, weeks to months, and effects are permanent. We can also have like this kind of a thing where yeah, we can have like effects linger for years. Okay. And then you have like scope of impact. This is what I was talking about earlier, like in terms of like, affects a part of the individual, affects only the individual, affects others in vicinity, and affects others at large. And then you have like scope of dependence, like how dependent can you get on these things, and probability of impact. For example, what is it? Maybe it's zero, maybe it's unknown, maybe there is some potential, maybe low chance of impact, has moderate or high chance of impact, and certain impact. And then also specificity of impact, you can say like affects no one, affects only those with specific pre-existing conditions. So like we were talking about things like genetic factors in terms of like measuring the probability of cancer and things like that. So depending on that, we can have that as one of the factors to use in measuring the classification of a drug. And affects most people, affects nearly all except some, and then everyone.
I don't think it would be accurate to say that it only affects people with already genetic predisposition to the cancer. It pretty much happens to all of us.
No, the reason why we have done it like this is, so let's say that if you're looking at a certain drug, for example, let's say cigarette as a product, okay? So we are looking at how do you regulate cigarettes? So that is a question that we want to answer. So when you take that as a question, so let's look at the impact of this on the physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual dimensions for not just one person, but also like multiple people. So scope of impact. Based on this, what you'll do is actually you will maybe like we will bring this out forward so that like we have this as one of the first things that we look at. So the reason why I'm breaking it down like this is, I think that we need to come up with a way to measure the overall score of like a certain drug. If you can have something like that where you have like a score, then it becomes really easy to have a objective classification mechanism. And it is objective, but we are also like taking into consideration all of the subjective aspects of what we do need in life, because like emotional well-being, psychological well-being, these are all like subjective things. I cannot tell you that you are living well or something. I cannot objectively classify your physiological status. It's a subjective experience. You have to tell the rest of the world as to how you are experiencing things. So we have to consider all of these things, but we have to ultimately have an objective framework where we can, classify something without any kind of like confusion or like, like logical inconsistencies, because that we do have that right now. So if you take cigarette as a product and you look at, okay, like I want to look at the emotional impact of this, or like, let's say not emotional impact, but I want to look at the physical impact of it. I want to look at this for the individual's health, affects only the individual. And then I want to see, like, if you observe something that you want to classify it, for example, if you want to look at lung cancer, then you look at, you map it out like this, affects only the individual, and the effect of impact is pretty high. Or let's say that if you have the frequency of exposure is like fairly high, and then it balance of effects, right? It definitely causes harm to the system. And then you have something like the severity of the effects. The severity of the effects is like fatal. You do get, like, if you have like high frequency of exposure and high severity, then it becomes fatal. And permanence of effects is like, this is kind of like a confusing thing, because like effects are kind of permanent. The lung damage is permanent, and period of exposure is persistent over decades. So actually, this is something that we have to probably move ahead over here. But anyway, and based on this, scope of dependence is like pretty high. Scope of dependence, definitely, there's like a huge amount of evidence to say that like you definitely get addicted to cigarettes over time. And we can also like look at like how do we actually classify these things to actually make sense, because I haven't thought about it through fully. I only had a little bit of time on Saturday to do this, and I had done whatever made sense at the time. But I did want to like bring it out in discussion so that we can talk about these things. Give me 1 second. I want to quickly see like if yeah, okay. So the scope of dependence is definitely certain, and probability of impact is certain, and specificity of impact is like it. When somebody is smoking for many years with high frequency of exposure, it definitely affects everybody. There is no, like pre-existing conditions. And rehabilitation cost is what? How do you classify the rehabilitation cost of somebody who's addicted to cigarettes?
Well, it's pretty non-existent.
But also, like, I think we need to have a separate column for like not just the rehabilitation cost, because rehabilitation cost is just one of the economic expenses. So we can just say cost to society. So cost to society is like we need to clean up the cigarette butts. We need to clean up, we need to take care of the health, because like if somebody has lung cancer because of cigarettes, right, it kind of like now is becoming a burden on the medical infrastructure in the society.
What do you think about adding another column about the success of rehabilitation, or the time of rehabilitation?
I think we can say reversibility. Reversibility is high or low, something like that. Reversibility of impacts. So you can say reversibility of effects. Yeah, I think you can start with, yeah, we'll have like different kind of scoring for different columns. And so for cost to society, I would say that it's not actually low. It is pretty high, because like if you look at the number of people, right, number of people who are getting addicted to cigarettes, and like they're undergoing these health hazards. So there is like a like a ripple effect of like expenses, like personal, individually, they're being affected, their family is suffering, and then there is a cost to the society, like cigarette butts and sanitation things, and like tobacco industry, like growing large amounts of tobacco that is causing environmental degradation. All of these are like collectively cost to society, right? So I would say it's pretty high. Or actually, we're talking about cost to society is pretty high, and then the reversibility of effects is like pretty low. I would say, I don't know, like see, one of the things reason why I did it like this is that we have a certain subjectivity to this. We can measure.
What do you exactly mean by reversibility of effects? I just want to know the exact meaning.
For example, let's say that we are measuring that there is an objective damage done to your lungs if you smoke for a many number of years, for a high frequency of exposure and all that. So if you look at that extent of lung damage, how reversible is this lung damage? If you stop using this drug, or if you have an antidote, is it possible to reverse these things, or is it like permanent? Right? Because there are certain drugs, like if you for example, if you use like if you smoke cigarettes for like let's say once or twice, and that's it, right? The reversibility is pretty high there. But for this use case, for in terms of like affecting the if you lock in the exposure and the I guess like period of exposure, you have like a certain lock over like what are the variables here, because these are all variables that kind of like have a say in how bad the effects are, right? So I'm just like locking in these things and then getting this pathway. So with this pathway, right, what we have is we're now going to have like a scoring thing done here. So actually I wanted to bring this in here. So in terms of classes, right? So you can have like some kind of a classification system based on just which of these columns and which of these numbers they attribute to. For example, here you can have this as one of the data points. So here you're scoring a 3. And then here the frequency of exposure, you're scoring a 3 again. So like this, you can sort of like have weightages for each of these things. And then you can multiply it with the factor. And then you can get a certain objective number. So with that number, when you add it all up, then you have like a score. Like, so we can have a scale to going from 0 to, let's say, 10 or something like that, based on maybe 0 to 100, whatever it is, based on which we'll get like a final score. So with that, we can get a sense of like which category to put this in. Okay, and
we can a passenger, like a vehicle safety system. They rate a vehicle about there are multiple facets that consider into something like that.
That's a really, really good idea. Why don't we do that? Because like exactly, like when they have like these NCAP ratings, they have like these different classification outcomes based on various safety factors. So when we look at that as like a very objective measurement of how safe a vehicle is. And we again say similarly for how we have drugs, we have similar considerations over there, because like the safety system of that vehicle is not just an impact to the individual who's occupying the vehicle. It is also also has an impact on the people who are in the direct vicinity of the person, and also the person, society at large. Because like if the car is like exploding, right, then we have like a clear outcome, a negative outcome for the people in the car, but also people surrounding the car. But if you have like a car that is capable of like driving off, like for example, like let's say a car that has like a self-driving capabilities, and now without any like let's say without any driver, it is able to go and autonomously like operate on its own. That's a society, that's an impact on society at large. So there are these various factors in question. I think that's probably one of the biggest insights that I think I've received in this call, is that we can compare this similar to a car classic, like car safety classification system. So maybe like let's look into this.
I think
the reversibility of effects from smoking are actually pretty high, because most of the permanent effects take at least 10 years to occur, and at minimum 5 years, it takes permanent changes to occur within 5 minutes. So I think it's pretty high. Changes could be reversible.
Yeah, but also it depends on See, reversibility is high if your usage and exposure is like, extent of exposure is low. But if you have like, let's say 5-10 years, over 10 years, you have a lot of exposure, right? Then it is like kind of like, it has like, the reversibility goes down. So in that case, what you'll do is like in this kind of a chart, you'll just like see, okay, the reversibility is low for this use case. So where there is high thing, right? So reversibility of effects is like, I would say for this one, it's low for severe use case. But if you're using like, if you're going for like, no scope of impact individual and then low, for frequency of exposure and duration of exposure is low, then it will be like, I would say the reversibility is higher. So that is what, so for each different variable, right, each different like contributing condition that we are using, we can have like a certain score. So based on that, we can like how to look at this drug in totality. But I want to quickly take the time to like look at how does the car safety system
You
work,
should look at Euro NCAP.
what are the
global NCAP. If you're
we'll just look as a general question first, and then like we'll look at the specifics. And what are the variables that it factors in to measure the overall safety of the vehicle? Designed to protect occupants and reduce the risk for accidents. They can be broadly classified or categorized into active and passive safety systems, anti-lock braking system, these kind of things. So actually, this industry is pretty what do you say, like very mature, right? And so they have like various, some of these things are actually standardized safety features.
Yeah, although it is very matured, there are even till today, Euro NCAP has certain shortcomings when it comes to certain things like a Moose test. Yeah, there are still shortcomings even to the best safety testing method, which is Euro NCAP. Even it has some shortcomings.
Of course, man. So that is something that we even expect for something like this, Neuro and NCAP ratings, car safety ratings. We can.
No, it's Euro NCAP. It's
Euro NCAP.
Europe. NHTSA is American. Euro.
Yeah, so I mean, I anticipate something like this, right? I'm not expecting this to be foolproof. We are just going off of what we know. So actually, there are certain things that we may not know about. So in that case, like the scoring is like maybe like inconclusive.
Yeah,
so actually,
we cannot make it absolutely perfect at the first.
Exactly, yeah. So we are going off of an objective guideline to look at like the system in a very objective way, so that like it becomes easier for us to create the drug regulation framework. So that is the and so I don't know if they offer some kind of like mechanism, how car selection applied, how to read the stars. I don't think that they would probably have like extremely transparent mechanisms, because they do probably have some IP around this.
No, they do give you when you see you can download any of the cars, like let's say Tesla Model S. You can download one of the safety ratings and you can see the categories.
Yeah,
because
so
of Tesla.
How safe is your car? Okay, so let's do one thing that maybe like all Indian people will recognize. We can go for like Tata or something. Is it even
so
like mentioned?
Basically the stars are like, okay, like what
Tata
type
is
of
not
this is
Euro
NCAP.
NCAP.
Yeah, it's Euro NCAP, right, sorry, yeah.
They
so we can go for
global NCAP.
Tesla Model S. I think Model S is the fastest, right?
I think I saw Suzuki.
Yeah.
Yeah, Suzuki, but the Suzuki is catering for European market, so the vehicles in India would not be listed.
I don't think there is any Indian manufacturer who has a Euro NCAP rating. They get global NCAP rating.
Yeah. So Euro NCAP is like very specific to the European market, and I do agree that they have like very high standards of safety, and it's a lot of the times it's better than sometimes even the global is like not so.
Yeah,
strong.
global NCAP is inferior to Euro NCAP actually.
Okay. So it's telling you there are certain categories and certain score, right? So we're talking about the occupants, the child, vulnerable road users, and safety assist. So I guess like they're just like summarizing the impact of the vehicle on these things alone. And I guess that makes sense, because like for us, right, the society at large is something that is a factor because of the drug consideration. But in terms of like the actual vehicle, I don't think there is such a huge impact. Or is there? Maybe like you can look at pollution as a thing, but I guess the objective of this thing is for purchase of the vehicle, right? We're not talking about the overall impacts of this vehicle, of the car industry on global.
No, it is just a safety rating.
I know, I'm just kind of like contrasting the systems with because the reason why they're only looking at this is because like they just want to look at this unit from the point of view of the consumer.
Because the point of view of how it affects you during your transport, like while you're in the car, how it affects you personally. It comes to safety. That's it.
Yeah, and I think this is like a lot simpler. What we are talking about is very, very complicated. Maybe it's because of the consideration. Like which object we are considering. Maybe car safety is like a easier problem to solve than drug regulation, for sure. Probably, to be honest.
I think there are some other metrics. I think if I can get some I'll get back to you. There are some other metrics in US that they do all this. Exactly the chart you have shown, right? There are other metrics. I'll try to get that one.
You know what I'm thinking? Like maybe like every Wednesday or like maybe some other day during the week, we can have like a session like this, brainstorming session, and every month we'll take a topic. And we'll come together for like, multiple sessions of brainstorming where we can do this, like for example, you just like came up with a couple of ideas, which is like looking at NCAP and then you're looking at like also drug regulation, how they do it in the US. So it can be, we also come up with something that maybe we'll have like an idea to float to this, people and we can have like basically like evolution in the narrative of these things. Sure. I find it like really exciting. But anyway, yeah, like let's look at that. And I do have to like go soon. That's why I'm trying to like, state these things.
There's a Bharat NCAP.
Yeah. But if you look at these
things,
Bharat
NCAP is based on global NCAP.
No, I was just saying.
Yeah. So they're basically categorized. See, the thing about car safety is that it's kind of like a simpler problem to solve because there are these are all like, human manufactured components. They're obviously...
you have objective classification. There is no subjectivity here. Okay. How much fatal...
no, that's what I'm trying to say something else here. See, the thing is that when you're manufacturing a vehicle, it's all like human manufactured. So therefore, they're obviously optimizing it for most, human benefits. So, for example, when they look at things like this, like safety assist, or like active bonnet, or like any of these features, right? These features are specifically designed for this purpose. So it becomes easy for them to measure the efficacy of that system, right? So they can have these different ratings based on how good the implementation is, and they can do that. But when it comes to drug regulation, it is not so simple. It's not a human manufactured thing. And it is not manufactured for the purpose of safety, first of all. It is manufactured for the purpose of, even if it is manufactured, it is manufactured for the purpose of something like, for example, an anesthetic, or it could be like research chemicals that are like synthetic opioids.
Methodology is transferable.
What do you mean? You mean this methodology is transferable to this use case?
Yes. Methodology means the way they approach it, how they dissect it, how they measure it, depending on...
no, but that's what I'm saying. Like I'm saying that it is a lot more complex. It's not as simple as this, because like I said, this is a thing made of like human made parts. So it's easy to diagnose. It begs a
question: does it need to be simplified? If it is, as we are talking about, if it is so complex, it begs a question: does it need to be simplified? Because if it stays complex, the way things we have to take it forward does actually gets into more complexity, and the result would be probably not. We probably will not reach it. I'm just hypothesizing. But again, the more complex it gets, the more harder for us to evaluate something and give it a score.
Its simplicity depends on who is viewing it in the first place.
There are two factors, I would say. There are two variables that we are basically optimizing for. One is in terms of like adoption, right? If something is like easily communicable and it makes sense, it is good to adopt that. The second thing is in terms of like how granular you make it. Like obviously, if it's simple, it becomes easily adopted. But how effective it is also dependent on like how granularly you measure something. So when you take something like a drug, you're looking at not just a short term, but you're also looking at the long term effects. You're not looking at the individual, but you're also looking at the larger scope of the impact of those things. And like this, there are things about the drug which we have to bring into consideration before we evaluate it, right? And there may be certain metrics that we are measuring which will automatically disqualify it. For example, if there's a drug which you happen to have it consume it at a certain dosage, it can immediately kill you, right? Then obviously you need to make sure that that is like automatically classified as something that is like, I guess like strictly classified substances, or like Schedule 5. Like the US system has like different schedules.
Lethal.
Yeah, lethal or fatal or something like that. But again, if you look at, like, for example, I was just thinking about like fertilizers. Like people drink fertilizers to kill themselves. So do you ban fertilizers, right? Because it has like an impact on people who do that. So it is yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Like if we talk about that, anything that's available out there is like, even I can extract something from anything. Like even from a bag of cement, I could extract something that make me high. It's about, people probably wouldn't go that far, wouldn't invest that much of energy, time, or brain power into something trying to invent new things.
That's why we need to classify drugs on the basis of like the rate of abuse. We don't have a large number of people who are abusing cement.
Or who are we even trying to classify this for? What are we making this chart for? What is it supposed to measure?
See,
and who's
when it comes to drug regulation, right? You're basically like regulating substances. So for each substance, you have to measure the impact. If you manage to accurately and objectively measure the societal impact of a certain drug substance, then based on the nature of the impact, we can have like different things that are of interest about the nature of the effect of this drug on things. For example, we're talking about like cost to society. This is a very important factor. Even if I'm not like addicted to something, or somebody is not addicted around me is not addicted to something, if somebody very, very far away is addicted to something, it affects me. So that is a point of concern for something that we are drafting for the benefit of society at large, because like, this is of interest to us. So on the basis of these things that are of interest to us, we will classify these things as dangerous or not so dangerous, or mild, or even beneficial. And based on that, we will have like different laws drafted for how to deal with these drugs.
I think if it is being made for public and your average people, then I think it should be as simplified as possible. But if it is being made for someone who understands this and is in a field that requires him to understand this, then I think we should just focus on making it as accurate as possible.
See, that's where something like this actually comes in handy, because like, what would you call the Euro NCAP as like complicated or simple?
I think it's moderately difficult to understand.
No, it's not a straightforward question. First of all, there are various layers to this like system. First of all, you guys know that like NCAP ratings are like done on the basis of star ratings. So you have like 3-star, 5-star, 4-star. That is what a consumer cares about.
Yeah, 2 cars which are safety given a 5-star rating, when you go in depth, they have a different rating on multiple levels actually.
Exactly. So this is like talking about at a very high level. It is talking about the competence of this vehicle in this whole thing. How feature rich, or like how they'll have like different definitions for what each star is. Like, what does 5-star mean? What does 4-star mean? Like that, they'll have like a certain definition. So, but from a consumer point of view, if I'm buying a car in India, if I hear that Tata Nexon has like 5 rating versus like a Suzuki Baleno or something, I as a consumer, the only thing I care about is the star rating. So that like, because somebody has done all the hard work for me, I don't have to go into the details. Somebody has given an objective rating for it. So I'll just like pick it on the basis of that. So from my perspective as a consumer, the NCAP ratings are very straightforward and simple. But if you're then coming in as a vehicle manufacturer, so that you understand how you have to design your vehicle to arrive at that rating, then you have like more detailed factors in display. So we can have something like this similar to this for the drug thing. So for example, if you look at legal, like lawyers and things like that, if they are looking at cases involving drug regulation or drug abuse or something like that, they can have like more solid metrics to argue on. So they will have to want the details. But somebody who's looking at purely from a law enforcement perspective, they don't need to do that. If a certain drug is like classified as Schedule 5, and Schedule 5 is supposed to be coming under all these restrictions, then you basically apply those laws without even thinking about the detailed aspects of that. And from a consumer point of view or an institutional point of view, you don't want to go into the details. Like if something is classified as being prohibited, then an institution has to follow that. So that is why I think we have to have layers of complexity, layers of detail, and the system of classification should kind of like converge into like a point of simplicity that is like applicable for a normal use case.
Yeah, that can be done.
Yeah, and I think you were saying something, Sandeep. What was that?
I was saying that let's say if I do have to like have a complex rating system for then it needs to be showcased in multiple layers. And then when you have to make it simpler for the, let's say in consumer, I'm not sure if it actually has to be done, but going forward, I think that is where we have to reach, because we are trying to give a number to the consumer to make a choice, right? Like, I mean, not like a choice, but at least to understand what is that number that is sticks to your mind, that it has like a, let's say if I rate it from A to E, A is the best, least effective, and E is the worst effective. And if you label a drug like E, and that it is inherently, it gives you a feeling, okay, this should have a lot of scrutiny to come out.
Yeah.
And but again, we have to, when we are trying to rank it, we have to consider multiple layers, and which layer is more important to give that rating to that particular drug.
Exactly. I think I agree with that. So I mean, we're like at 8:50, and I need to go in 10 minutes. I think we'll just like summarize or like summarize what we need to do next. So like next time when we connect on the brainstorming session, we can just like continue from there. So objectives are basically requiring classify in layers of complexity and class or actually, you know what, instead of this, let's talk about in terms of what are the aspects of any drug that we must look into in order to frame laws around it. So let's come up with like a finite list of like those things that we need to have as something to look at in order to understand how to do things. For example, right, if like in the example of a car safety, right, if you see that the probability of a car, like, okay, let's say that the car has like all the safety features you need, like like airbags and all the ABS, AES, whatever, all these things it has. But then there is like it has one fatal flaw, which is that even if you like manage to like swerve the car like this by a little bit at a certain speed, it collapses and it just like completely like explodes or something. Because even though it had like excelled in all the other things, because it failed one critical thing, which makes it like a really unsafe vehicle to have, it should basically have like very low ratings.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So we need to look at that kind of a thing where we are, even though we are having an objective system, we need to prioritize certain flaws in impacting the overall rating.
Yes.
So that's a very challenging task if you ask me. But for example, in the thing that we came up with, right, this thing, if you look at this, if, for example, something that, let's say that if there is a certain something, for example, right, this is this pathway that we're looking at. Physical affects only the individual. So you can actually move these around and you can have like a certain pathway to this. So for this pathway, we have like certain priority, like we can have weightages for different pathways.
Yes,
and that way what's going to happen is we can give those pathways like certain high weightages so that like we can have those be more important than the other things. So even if something else scores like really highly on certain things, because it has this one variable there, we can just like remove or like basically
I understand. There is one layer that is very important. Even if the other layers are
exactly
insignificant, that layer will dictate how that the rating will be for that particular drug.
Yep.
Actually, I was working on a similar type of system, but regarding rating of company practices when it comes to sustainability and renewable practices, sustainable practices when it comes to global warming. So let's say if this company would have like a certain, let's say Coca-Cola, right? I would give it 0. So if there is a company which is working towards something, then let's say Tesla, I would give it a 9, something like that. So this kind of a scale would tip, just like a safety rating, the company, the purpose of the company and their objective to the future of humanity. How will it will affect the future of humanity? That kind of a complex system that I was working like 3 to 4 years ago. I didn't catch it up later on, but something like that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think we can get together and maybe like by the end of the month, like we'll do this for 4 sessions. We'll try to wrap it up in 4 sessions, because like one of the things I'm trying to do is like to have this kind of a like platform where we can, as a society, we can come together to solve problems rather than just like talk about things and argue and debate. I want to have like constructive conversations. I'm really tired of unproductive conversations. So I want to have this like a format, and we can start looking at various other topics in question, because there are various problems in our society, and if we as citizens, we as like proactive, competent citizens of the country, we don't adopt this mindset, then I think that we are looking at a loss of opportunity there. So that's the objective of this. So we can have like impromptu sessions on Wednesday. Maybe we can have like dedicated weekly brainstorming sessions, so that like we don't like we are not trying to replace existing debate sessions.
Yeah, I'm glad you started this, because even I was actually honestly expecting this kind of an output, but I was very skeptical even when I joined the debate club. But then I saw your video that you posted like 2 to 3 days ago, right? And then this brainstorming session, I'm very glad to see that some of my perceptions are coming into action, because I was tied up in a lot of personal things for a very long time.
Okay.
I'm glad to see. I'm just trying to say I'm glad to find the connection here.
Absolutely, man. I'm glad to hear from you about this as well, because like I know that there are a lot of people in society who actually have these kind of like constructive ideas, and we just don't have the platform. And I'm just trying to create that with this. So we just need to have like effective standard operating procedures to ensure that we are doing this. So I think we can work together to make that happen. So I need to go soon. What I'll do is like we've listed out the things that we need to discuss next time, right? So let's discuss like when we are connecting. I don't know if Wednesday is going to work out all the days, because like we have these impromptu sessions, right? Or should we keep the brainstorming sessions on Wednesday, and then like whenever these impromptu sessions come, we can have a separate time slot?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, I think that we'll do that, because like I want to bring this to the center, and Wednesday slot is something that is already established, so we can just move this here.
It is very productive if you keep to a schedule, because if you lay it all over, then we wouldn't have that kind of an output that we hope for. Because if, let's say, Wednesday, we try to do something in this week, because if we don't have a certain solid deadlines or something, it's very hard to get little results.
Yeah, so let's also like come up with like next meeting. So let's come up with like a deadline and an outcome by the end of September, right? So yeah, because like I want to make this a thing where every month we are taking a topic, and whatever progress we can make in constructively solving that problem within that month,
yes,
we are able to do that. And we have,
that's a very good one.
Yeah, because like we're locking the scope, because like I don't think people would find it entertaining to have like 6 months on one topic. People don't have that patience. So we have to be realistic about things. We have to keep it realistic, and then like, you know, also have like, we have to draw a balance between what is engaging and what is productive. So I think 1 month per topic is like good bit of thing. And then that also demands that we take up topics that are as serious enough that we need a month. But maybe there are certain things that are way too serious, or certain things that are like not as serious that we need four sessions for it. So this is like 8 hours per month, you know, that's all we're investing, but the outcome is like, you know, we will have something to show for it. So looking forward to see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for the contributions.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.